G'day folks, and welcome to Great Chesterford Junction, and we're doing just a little tutorial here, and it's not even a tutorial, it's more of an improvement on a method of making bushes that I've done before, and I'm using that on a little barred field here behind me to go through the process of greening the place. Now what we're looking at is these little bushes here, this sort of thing, and there's more over this side, and it's the method for actually creating them, which is not too different from what you've seen before, but I found a better way to work on, especially the ones on the hillsides. This is assuming that you're able to drill a hole into your scenery to accept the stem of one of these. So I suppose you could still glue them on with the method I'm using. I'd probably use a super glue or something, but we'll go through how I'm doing it, and you can adapt it to suit your own needs. Now most of these down the bottom here are done with the hot glue gun method, where you take the hemp string and insert it into the hot glue, and then it goes off fairly quick, and then you can create your bushes by the usual method with the spray can and flocking and even some static grass, etc. But these ones up on the hillside here are a different kettle of fish, and they're made with this different method that I've worked out, and we'll go through that and show you some of that. Now what we've got here, folks, is obviously you can see that I've got some little bushes waiting here that were done using the hot glue method, so they're just quite simple really. But what we're looking at is a different way of doing these. And I've also got some static grass here. Colour really doesn't matter. I've got some fine sawdust here, which I coloured up in my grinder to give me a nice dark sort of ground cover sort of colour. I've got some homemade flocking here, which I've put through a strainer to get some fine stuff here, and I've also got some more of my homemade flocking here in different tones to and I've put that through the strainer to get some fine flocking. Now you can put commercial flocking through a strainer as well to get the same result, and I've just got some here. I'll grab it. Right, so this is commercial stuff, and you can get the same result. What you can do is put this through a strainer and get the finer particles out of it to use on bushes. So all I've got is a pretty standard kitchen strainer. You can get ones with finer mesh, but I think this one with the sort of larger holes is better. If you go too fine, you'll never get anything out of it. Oh, you might do, but I don't know. Anyway, but the way you do it is just like this. Right, you get yourself an empty tub to put the new stuff in, and you need something to stir the flocking around, so I'll just use another strainer I've got here, the handle of it. And so you take some of your flocking, whack it in the strainer, and then instead of shaking it around, if you shake it around, some of it jumps out. So I just take another handle of the strainer and just stir it around, and I hope you can see there that the fine stuff is starting to come out through the strainer. So this is ideal for bushes because it's so much smaller. You don't want really dirty great big chunks of flocking sitting on your bushes, because it just looks like someone's cut a tree down. So we just go through that process. I suppose I don't have to do much of it, but I'm not going to use this today. But yeah, and it turns out like that. That's very, very fine.
So it's ideal for bushes. So that's one way you can get your fine flocking. And I mean, even for ground cover and stuff like that, if you've got flocking, commercial flocking sitting at home, and you think, oh gee, I need some finer ground cover, just put it through the strainer. So that's simple. I should have also mentioned I've got some Mission Brown spray enamel here, and I got it at a $2 shop. It's quite a lot cheaper at a $2 shop, and just some cheap Aldi hairspray. This also is a handy item. This is just a clothes bag, and what I'm going to do with that is just use that to grip the bush when it's finished, so I can put it in there and I can just sort of stand it on the bench. It'll stand up on its own. So yeah, that's all that's for. So basically what you need, folks, is you need to get everything set up on your workbench or whatever you're using, ready to go, because we're going to be working quickly, and you need to be able to access all these things straight away, because once the method requires spraying the brown paint onto the bush and then immediately putting flocking or static grass onto it. So you've got to work quickly so that the paint will and the grass will stick together. I mean, at the end of it, we're going over the lot with some hairspray anyway, but it's good to have everything laid out so you can just access it as soon as you've sprayed the bush. So let's get on with it. So here we go. We've just got a bit of hemp rope that cut to whatever length you want, and if you unravel that, it turns into a series of, or a number of, strings. So for a bush I'm using minimum of 2, and most times I'm using 3. So that's what we're starting with. I then make sure the bottoms of them are squared off. They don't have to be, but it's handy if they are. I then take it and I just put a little bit of it, the ends of it, into the jaws of my vise, and then I squeeze it tight. Now, if you haven't got a vise, you could use a pair of pliers. It doesn't really matter, but you need something to hold this really tight. So, you know, if you've got pliers, I'd use an old pair. If you've got an old heavy pair that you're not too worried about, use them. We then take some bog standard $2 shop, £1 shop super glue, cheapest chips. The liquid stuff, you don't want gel for this, it must be liquid. And then what we do is we go over to our strings just as they are, and very close to the jaws on the vise or the pliers or whatever you're using. Put a drop of super glue onto the string, then put the super glue down, and then we twist the string tight, really tight. Now we just hold that there, I'd say maybe for 30 seconds or so. What you want is the glue to take hold in the string and hold it in that twisted position. So what we've got here is probably from there to there, which is maybe 10 mils of string with super glue embedded in it, and that's drying as we speak. Now once it's dry, if we let it go and start to unravel it, it only unravels to this point here. This part here, this 10 mils or so, is now stiff. It's like plastic. So we can remove that from the vise. And this is the hazard with using a vise or a pair of pliers. Sometimes it sticks a bit in there, so you need to be able to clean up your tools if you can with a wire brush or something. So I'm not too worried about this. I can get all that off, but that's one of the side effects of doing it this way. So now we just start to unravel the strings into these finer fibers, and you know, it takes a little while to tease them out. And at this stage you can also do some shaping on the bush. You might want to trim a few bits off here and there, but that's up to you. This is all artistic control now, folks. We've done the hard part, so you start working it out, teasing it out, and you start to finish up with something that looks a bit like this. You can bend it down a bit, make sure some of the thicker bits are Sorry if I'm moving away from the lens, but I'm trying to look at what I'm doing and look at the camera at the same time. So yeah, get all the odds and sods off, and yeah, when you've got something that sort of resembles a bush, and we're getting close to that now, and don't be too precise with it. Get a few bits hanging down if you can, and eventually you'll get to the stage where you'll think, that's it, that'll do. Right, so what I'm going to do now, folks, is I'm going to hold this squashed up bit at the bottom with a pair of tweezers. This flattened out bit that that's what the vice did to the string. I'm going to hold that with a pair of tweezers, and then I'm going to walk away from the camera and I'm going to spray this bush brown, and then we're going to come back and quickly work on adding the static grass to it first, spray it again, and then we'll add some of the fine flocking to it. So everything is going to work from this point here, because I can't fiddle with the camera and spray and do everything really quickly, so I'll operate from this point here. Okay, so the first thing is we're going to spray the bush with the initial coat of brown, and of course this bit here at the bottom that I'm holding, this flat piece, that'll get cut off. We'll finish up with just a round stem at the bottom here eventually, but this at the moment is handy to hold it. So right, we're going to go off and spray it, and then we'll come back and quickly start adding the components to it. Okay, here we go. Right folks, we're wet at the moment, so I'm going to add some static grass. We've got the brown on there, so I'm just turning it over to get some underneath as well. And I mean, I've actually made some bushes where I've just used only static grass, and we'll tap that off. Now what we'll do is go and give this another spray, and then we'll come back and use some flocking. Right, what the static grass has done is actually bulked up the string, and so when we start adding flocking on some of the fine stuff, it attaches to the static grass as well as the string itself. So we'll just add a bit more on there, that's not too bad. Give it a bit of a tap. I'll get some of the sawdust ground cover stuff that I made, I'll put some of that on just quickly. Right, so we'll just give that a tap. I'm quite happy with that as it is. Now I'm going to walk away from the camera again and give all this an overspray of hairspray. Right, that's done with the hairspray, and it's the hairspray is sort of sealing it in place. So now we'll take our peg, and this will be the tricky bit. I might need another pair of tweezers actually to do this. So what I'll do is I'll grab a bit further up the stem there with the tweezers, take the first pair off, then come back with the peg and just grip that bit that was initially in the vise, and there we have our bush. Right, there we go, that's how it's turned out. I think the lighting wasn't very good from the angle I had where I did the actual demo, but this is how it's turned out. Now that's a pretty rough looking old bush, so it'll look good sort of planted in scenery somewhere. And so the process now is that when that's dry, it's probably pretty much dry enough now to plant into scenery, I take a drill bit to my scenery, because my scenery is made with polystyrene, which is carved, and then it's got a plaster skin over it, and plaster of Paris, and I just drill a hole through that, a hole that's around about the same size as the stem, and then I dip the end of the stem in, the one that's been trimmed off. We trim off the flat bit. I dip the end of the stem into some PVA and then push it in the hole, feed it in, hold the stem with a pair of tweezers, and there she goes. That's how it's done. So we might have a look at that too. Okay folks, I've drilled my hole with my drill bit, so that'll stay there until I go and get my bush. And what I'll do with the bush is I'll trim the flat bit off the bottom. I'll then put a blob of PVA onto a bit of wood, and then I'll dab the bottom of the stem of the bush into the PVA, and then I'll come back, remove the drill bit and put the bush in the hole. Okay, here we are. We've got our bush with a bit of PVA on it, and we'll just take the drill bit out and then we'll push that into the hole and leave it there to set. Okay, and that's how it's worked out. Now the beauty of this is that by drilling a hole in the scenery, you don't have that flat base on the bottom of the bush to deal with. On the ones with the flat bases, if you can see the base, I'm adding a bit of flocking just around the base at the bottom to disguise it. I also trim them down a bit to make them smaller, but with the super glue method you don't need to do any of that. Once the glue dries, it just looks like the what would you call it, the trunk of a bush coming out of the scenery there. So that's it. Okay folks, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll leave you with it. I've got a few more bushes to make.